All right, listeners, get ready because today we are diving deep into Hong Kong's rental market. It's no secret that Hong Kong is one of the most expensive cities in the world, and a big part of that cost is, well, rent.
Definitely. But before you give up on your dreams of living in Hong Kong, we're here to tell you that finding an affordable place to live in Hong Kong is totally doable.
It is, and we've got just the intel to prove it. We are going deep into this awesome guide we found all about finding cheap rent in Hong Kong. So if you're ready to find your dream Hong Kong apartment without going broke, stick with us. Let's unpack this. Why is Hong Kong's rental market so notoriously intense?
Well, imagine this. You've got like 8 million people all trying to live on an island that's half the size of London. That is basically Hong Kong in a nutshell.
8 million people.
Yeah, and then
Hey, what?
you add in tons of people moving here from all over the world. You can see why it's such a crazy competitive market.
I can practically feel the crowds just thinking about it. But hold on, didn't I hear something about rents actually going down recently?
Yeah, you heard right. So, Hong Kong's residential property price index actually dropped by a pretty significant amount, like 12.52% in the third quarter of last year.
2024.
Exactly. Now, that doesn't mean that rent is suddenly dirt cheap, but it does show that the market might be cooling down a bit, which could mean lower rents. So keep that in mind as we go through different neighborhoods.
Okay, that is good news. So let's say I'm ready to start my apartment hunt in Hong Kong. Where do I even begin?
2 words: start early. Like, don't wait till the last minute. I'd say give yourself at least 2 months, especially if you're picky about where you want to live.
Okay, 2 months. That's more time than I'm used to.
Yeah, trust me, it's better to be prepared. And don't just limit yourself to one way of finding apartments. Check online platforms, talk to people, even just walk around neighborhoods and see what you find.
So where can you actually find cheap rent in Hong Kong? Let's go neighborhood hopping.
Let's start in Kowloon. It tends to be more budget-friendly than Hong Kong Island.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, first stop, Guntong. Yeah, it's like this fascinating blend of modern and traditional. You can walk down a street lined with tea shops, turn a corner, and suddenly you're surrounded by these sleek new co-working spaces and art galleries. It's pretty cool.
I like the sound of that.
And that mix of old and new often means you can find more affordable housing options.
Sounds like my kind of place.
Mm.
Are there any other hidden gems in Kowloon we should know about?
Absolutely. Sham Shui Po. This neighborhood is famous for its street markets. You can find everything there, from vintage clothes to delicious street food.
Street food.
It's a great spot to experience that local atmosphere and maybe score some bargains too.
Okay, now, a lot of people think that Hong Kong Island is only for millionaires.
Right.
Is there any chance of finding affordable rent over there?
You know what? That's actually a misconception. While some parts of the island are definitely super expensive, there are definitely some affordable areas if you know where to look.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Okay. Shangwan is a good place to start. Think trendy cafes, art galleries, cool little boutiques, and right next to those, you'll find traditional Chinese medicine shops and temples. It's a really neat mix of old and new, and you can often find smaller apartments there that are perfect for individuals or couples.
Okay, I can picture it now. Sipping coffee in a cafe surrounded by art.
Exactly.
Any other spots we should check out?
Yeah. If Shangwan is a little too busy for you, you can hop over to Sai Ying Pun.
Sai Ying Pun.
It's got more of a laid-back village vibe, but you're still really close to the city center. It's just a quick MTR right away.
Okay.
Plus, Sai Ying Pun is known for this mix of old and new architecture, which gives it a really unique charm.
Okay, so we've got Kowloon and Hong Kong Island covered. What about the new territories? Is that worth exploring for cheap rent?
The new territories are definitely worth exploring, especially if you're after more space, a quieter lifestyle, or maybe you're starting a family.
Okay.
And yeah, rent is generally more affordable compared to Kowloon or Hong Kong Island.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What area should we check out over there?
Well, if you love nature and want a peaceful escape, Sai Kung is calling your name.
Sai Kung.
Picture this. Lush green mountains, sparkling blue waters, charming waterfront villages. It's a haven for hiking water sports and escaping the city chaos.
Wow, that sounds amazing. But is it realistic for someone who still needs to work in the city?
That depends on how much you like commuting. It is further out, so be prepared for a longer travel time.
Okay, fair enough.
Oh.
What about other spots in the new territories?
If you're looking for more of a suburban vibe with good schools and a strong sense of community, Tuen Mun is a popular option, especially for families. It's got residential areas, parks, shopping malls, even a beach.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground in terms of neighborhoods. I'm starting to get a little overwhelmed with all these choices.
I bet.
How do I actually narrow down and find the perfect apartment for me?
Don't worry, feeling overwhelmed is totally normal. Remember that 2-month lead time we talked about? Now's the time to use it. Start by making a list of your must-haves and your deal breakers. What are you not willing to compromise on in terms of budget, location size, and amenities?
Okay, so prioritize and get organized.
Exactly.
Got it. So what about actually finding apartments? Are there any websites or resources that are particularly helpful?
Hong Kong has tons of online rental platforms. Some popular ones are 28 Hace, House 730, and Spacious. They let you filter by all sorts of things like price, district size. You can even filter for things like pet friendliness or whether there's a balcony.
Love a good balcony.
Right.
Any tips for navigating those websites? I feel like I always get overwhelmed by all the listings.
Here's a pro tip. Use specific keywords when you search. So instead of just searching for, like, apartment, if you're looking for a studio in Kwun search Studio Kwun. That'll help narrow things down.
Makes sense. What about social media? Is that a good place to look for apartments?
You can definitely find rentals on platforms like Facebook groups or Carousel. But you got to be careful. There are more scams on those less regulated platforms.
Scams.
Yeah.
Okay. How can I avoid falling for one of those?
Honestly, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If the rent is way lower than average for that area, or if the landlord is like really pushy about making a decision fast without checking you out properly, those are red flags.
So trust your gut. If it feels off, walk away.
Exactly. And always verify the ownership of the property. Ask the landlord for proof of ownership documents, or check the land registry's website to make sure they really own the place.
Okay. I never thought about that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, better safe than sorry.
So let's say I found a few promising apartments online. What's next?
Reach out to the landlord or the agent and schedule a viewing. That's your chance to actually see the place, ask questions, and get a feel for the neighborhood.
Okay, what kind of questions should I be asking?
Definitely ask about any extra costs besides the rent, like management fees, utility bills, building maintenance fees, things like that.
Okay.
Also ask about the lease terms, the deposit amount, and whether they allow pets, if that's important to you.
Okay, I'll bring my list of questions. What about using a real estate agent? Is that a good idea?
It can be, especially if you're new to Hong Kong and don't really know how the rental process works here. Agents have local expertise. They can help you find properties that fit your needs, and they handle all the negotiations and paperwork.
Okay, that sounds convenient.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's a catch, right?
Well, the catch is the commission fee. They usually charge a percentage of the annual rent, which can really add up,
How much are we talking?
usually around 50 to 100% of 1 month's rent.
Yikes, that's a big chunk of change.
Yeah. If you're on a tight budget, you can try to find rentals directly from landlords. Many landlords will list their properties online or through word of mouth.
Okay, so it's all about weighing the pros and cons of each approach. Okay, so now that we've talked about finding apartments and viewings, what about actually applying for an apartment? How do I make a strong application?
Preparation is key. Make sure you have all your documents ready, like a copy of your ID or passport, proof of income, maybe a reference letter from a previous landlord or employer.
So anything that shows the landlord, I'm a responsible tenant.
Basically, having those documents ready will make things smoother, and it shows the landlord that you're serious about renting their place.
Good point. What about those rental scams we talked about? Any tips for making sure I'm dealing with a legitimate landlord or agent?
That's so important. Rental scams are a real problem here.
Yeah.
One red flag is a deal that seems too good to be true. So like we said, if the rent is way lower than average, or the landlord wants you to decide super fast without really checking you out, be cautious.
Okay, so trust my gut.
Exactly. And always check who owns the property. You can do that on the land registry's website. Or ask the landlord for proof of ownership.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. And always get a written tenancy agreement. It should clearly lay out all the terms and conditions, like the rent, the deposit, how long the lease is, all the important stuff.
So don't sign anything until I've read it carefully.
Right.
Okay, so I've found a place I love, and I'm ready to make an offer. Any tips for negotiating rent in Hong Kong?
Negotiation is definitely part of the game here.
Don't be afraid to haggle a bit.
Exactly. Especially if you've done your research and you know what similar places are going for, if you have good references, stable income, you're in a good spot to negotiate. You can also try to negotiate things like the length of the lease, when you can move in, even minor repairs or renovations.
Good to know. So it sounds like finding an apartment in Hong Kong is all about being prepared,
Yeah.
doing your research,
Yeah,
and being strategic.
absolutely.
Okay, all this talk about contracts and negotiations is making me realize there's a whole financial side to this rental adventure. Let's talk money.
Okay.
So, what kind of costs can I expect beyond that monthly rent payment?
Hmm. Well, aside from the rent itself, you'll usually need to pay a deposit up front, usually equal to 2 months' rent.
Whoa, 2 months rent for a deposit.
Yeah, it's pretty standard here.
Is there any way to negotiate that?
It's always worth trying, especially if you're a good candidate with solid references. Some landlords might be open to a slightly lower deposit, but no guarantees.
Okay, so 2 months for a deposit. Anything else?
If you're using an agent, remember there's that commission fee, and then there's stamp duty. It's a small tax on the lease agreement, required by law in Hong Kong.
Okay. Deposit agency fee, stamp duty, it's adding up. What about ongoing monthly expenses?
Well, it really depends on your lifestyle and where you live. If you want a super basic setup in a less central area, you might be looking at around 7,000 Hong Kong dollars per month just for the apartment. But if you want a bigger place in a more central spot, you could easily spend 36,000 Hong Kong dollars or more per month.
Wow, that's a big range.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say I've found my dream apartment. Signed the lease, I've moved in. Any tips for settling into Hong Kong life?
First things first, get yourself an Octopus card.
An octopus card.
Yeah, it's this rechargeable, contactless card that you use for like all public transport, even convenience stores, supermarkets, some restaurants.
Oh, I remember getting my first octopus card. What a game changer.
Oh, right? It's so convenient.
You can go anywhere with the tap of a card.
Next, get to know your neighborhood. Explore the local shops, markets, restaurants. Hong Kong is all about those vibrant street scenes.
And the food.
Oh my gosh, the food. Hong Kong is a foodie paradise.
I love wandering through those markets, trying all the delicious food.
Speaking of which, what are some must-try dishes for someone new to Hong Kong?
Ooh, good question.
Okay, so many options. You can't go wrong with classics like dim sum, char siu, that's barbecued pork, wonton noodles, and if you're feeling brave, try stinky tofu.
Sneaky tofu.
Yeah.
I'll have to be brave for that one.
It's an experience.
Okay, so we've got food covered. What about other things to do in Hong Kong?
Hong Kong is so much more than just a city. It's an experience. You've got stunning natural beauty, hiking trails through lush mountains, beaches just a ferry ride away. Explore the art scene, catch a show, get lost in the markets. There's something for everyone here.
So much to see and do. Any recommendations for places that we didn't cover earlier?
If you haven't been to Mongkok yet, put it on your list. It's a total sensory overload. In the best way possible, you'll find street food stalls, bustling markets, neon lights, people everywhere. It's the heart of Hong Kong's energy.
Mongkok sounds like my kind of place. What about quieter escapes?
If you want a more relaxed vibe, head to Stanley. It's on the south side of Hong Kong Island. It's got a charming waterfront, beaches, a more laid-back atmosphere than the city center.
Okay, adding Stanley to my list. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners as they embark on their Hong Kong rental adventure?
Remember, finding an apartment in Hong Kong, it's a journey, not a race. Be patient, be persistent, and don't be afraid to think outside the box.
I love that. And remember, this deep dive has given you the tools. Now it's time to take action. Hong Kong is waiting.
Happy explore.
So the new territories, it's always seemed so mysterious to me, like another world compared to the city. Is it a good place to look for cheaper rent?
Definitely worth exploring,
Hmm.
especially if you want more space or a quieter lifestyle. Maybe you're starting a family.
Hmm.
And yeah, the rent is generally lower than in Kowloon or on Hong Kong Island.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Which areas should we check out?
Well, for nature lovers and anyone who just wants a peaceful retreat, Sai Kung is the place to be.
Sai Kung.
Yeah. Just imagine lush green mountains, sparkling blue water, charming little villages on the waterfront. It's perfect for hiking water sports and escaping the city.
That sounds like a dream.
Yeah.
But is it realistic if I still need to work in the city?
It depends how much you mind commuting. Sai Kung is further out, so the commute will be longer.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What about other areas in the new territories?
If you're looking for more of a suburban vibe, with good schools and a real sense of community, Tunun is a popular choice, especially for families. It's got a mix of everything. Residential areas, parks, shopping malls, even a beach.
Wow, okay. So we've talked about a lot of different neighborhoods. I'm starting to get overwhelmed with all the options.
Yeah, I get it.
How do I actually choose? How do I find the perfect apartment?
It's totally normal to feel overwhelmed. Remember, we talked about starting your search early. Now's the time to really dig into it. So, start by making a list. Your must-haves, your deal breakers. What are you absolutely not willing to compromise on? Budget, location, size, amenities.
Okay.
Yeah.
So prioritize and get organized.
Exactly.
Got it. What about actually finding apartments? Are there any websites that are particularly helpful?
Oh, yeah. Hong Kong has so many online rental platforms. Some popular ones are 28H, House 730, and Spacious.
Okay, I've heard of those.
They're great. You can
Yeah.
filter by all kinds of things, price, district size, even things like if they allow pets or if there's a
Absolutely
balcony.
love a good balcony.
Right.
Any tips for using those websites? I always get overwhelmed by all the listings.
Oh, yeah. Here's a pro tip. Be specific with your search terms. So, like, don't just search apartment. If you're looking for a studio in Kwun Tong, search Studio Kwun Tong.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, it'll narrow down your results.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about social media? Is that a good place to look?
You can find some places on Facebook groups or Carousel, but you got to be super careful. There are more scams on those platforms.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How can I avoid getting scammed?
Honestly, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Like if the rent is way lower than it should be for that area, or the landlord's pressuring you to make a decision really fast without checking you out, those are red flags.
Okay. So trust your gut.
Right. And always verify the ownership of the property. Like, ask for proof of ownership documents, or check the land registry website yourself.
To make sure they actually own the place.
Exactly.
Never thought about that.
Good tip.
Better safe than sorry.
So, okay, let's say I found a few places online that I like. What next?
Reach out to the landlord or the agent
Mm.
and schedule a viewing. That way you can see the place in person, ask questions, and get a feel for the neighborhood.
Okay, what kind of questions should I ask? For sure, ask about any costs on top of the rent, like management fees, utility bills, building maintenance, stuff like that.
Okay.
Also ask about the lease terms, how much the deposit is, and whether they allow pets, if that matters to you.
Okay. What about using a real estate agent? Is that a good idea?
It can be, especially if you're new to Hong Kong and you don't really know how the whole rental process works here. Agents know the local market. They can help you find places that fit your needs, and they take care of all the negotiations and paperwork.
Okay, that sounds super convenient.
Mm-hmm.
But I bet there's a downside.
Well, downside is the commission fee. They usually charge a percentage of the annual rent, which can be a lot.
How much are we talking?
Usually it's around 50 to 100% of 1 month's rent.
Ouch. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. If you're trying to save money, you could try to find a place directly from a landlord. A lot of landlords list their properties online or through word of mouth.
Okay, so weigh the pros and cons.
Perfect.
Okay, now that we've covered finding apartments and viewings, what about the actual application process? How do I make my application stand out?
Preparation is key. Make sure you have all the necessary documents ready to go, like your ID or passport, proof of income, maybe a reference letter from a past landlord or employer.
So anything that shows the landlord that I'm responsible.
Exactly. Having those documents ready, it makes the whole process smoother, and it shows the landlord you're serious.
Makes sense. Now, we talked about rental scams earlier. Any other tips for making sure I'm dealing with a legitimate landlord or agent?
It's so important to be careful. There are a lot of scams out there.
Yeah.
Like we said, if the rent seems way too low, or the landlord's pressuring you to decide really fast without doing their due diligence, those are warning signs.
So if it feels wrong, don't do it.
Exactly. And always verify who owns the property. Check the land registry website or ask for proof of ownership documents.
Okay, good to know.
And one more thing. Always get a written tenancy agreement. It should clearly state all the terms and conditions, like how much the rent is, how much the deposit is, how long the lease is, all that important stuff.
So don't sign anything until I've read it carefully.
Right.
Okay, so let's say I found the perfect apartment. I'm ready to make an offer. Any tips for negotiating rent in Hong Kong?
Negotiation is definitely a thing here, especially if you've done your research and you know what similar apartments are renting for.
Okay.
If you've got good references. Stable income, you're in a good position to negotiate. You can also try to negotiate things like the length of the lease, your move-in date, even small repairs or renovations.
Good to know. So finding an apartment in Hong Kong is all about being prepared, doing your research, and having a strategy.
Basically.
Okay, all this talk about contracts and negotiations is making me realize there's a whole financial side of this. Let's talk money.
Let's do it.
All right, let's talk numbers. What kind of costs am I looking at beyond the monthly rent?
Okay, well, on top of the rent itself, you'll usually have to pay a deposit up front, which is typically 2 months' rent.
2 months.
Yeah,
That's a lot to pay all at once.
it is. But it's pretty standard here in Hong Kong.
Is there any way to negotiate that?
You can always try. especially if you have good references and a steady income. Some landlords might be open to a slightly lower deposit, but there's no guarantee.
Okay, so 2 months rent for the deposit. What else should I factor in?
If you're using an agent,
Mhm.
don't forget about their commission fee. Plus, there's stamp duty. It's a small tax on the lease agreement.
Okay, so deposit agency fees, stamp duty, it all adds up.
Just,
Okay, so what about ongoing monthly expenses?
well, it really depends on your lifestyle and where you choose to live. For a very basic setup in a less central area, you might be looking at around 7,000 Hong Kong dollars per month just for the apartment. But for a larger place in a more central location, it could easily be 36,000 Hong Kong dollars or more per month.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It is.
Okay, so let's say I found my dream apartment. I signed the lease, I moved in. What are your top tips for settling into Hong Kong life?
Number one, get an octopus card.
An octopus card.
Yeah, it's this rechargeable card you can use for all the public transport. You can even use it at convenience stores, supermarkets, some restaurants.
It's so convenient.
It is.
I remember getting my first octopus card. I felt like I could go anywhere.
Exactly. Once you've got that sorted, take some time to get to know your neighborhood, explore the local shops and markets, find your new favorite restaurants.
Yes. Hong Kong has such a vibrant energy,
It does.
especially in those street markets.
Definitely.
Speaking of food, what are some must-try dishes for someone new to Hong Kong?
Ooh, there are so many. You can't go wrong with the classics like dim sum, char siu, wonton noodles, and if you're feeling adventurous, try this stinky tofu.
Stinky tofu.
It's an experience.
Okay, so we've talked about the food. What else is there to do in Hong Kong?
Hong Kong is more than just a city. It's an experience.
I like
There's so much natural beauty, hiking trails in the mountains, beaches, just a short ferry right away. You can explore the art scene, catch a show at the Hong Kong Cultural Center, get lost in the markets. There really is something for everyone.
it. Sounds amazing. Any other recommendations for places we didn't get to talk about earlier?
If you haven't been to Mongkok yet, definitely check it out. It's a bit chaotic, but in a good way. Think street food stalls, busy markets, neon lights everywhere. It's the heart of Hong Kong's energy.
Mongkok sounds right up my alley. What about if I'm looking for something a bit more chill?
If you want a more relaxed vibe, head to Stanley. It's on the south side of Hong Kong Island. It's got a nice waterfront, some beaches, and a more laid-back atmosphere compared to the city center.
Okay, I'm making a note of that. Stanley,
It's worth a visit.
any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they start their Hong Kong apartment hunt?
Remember, finding an apartment in Hong Kong is a journey. It takes time. Be patient, be persistent, and don't be afraid to think outside the box.
I love that. And remember, listeners, this deep dive has given you the tools. Now it's time to take action. Hong Kong is waiting.
Happy apartment hunting!